The signal first appeared as nothing more than a whisper in the cosmic noise. Dr. Sarah Chen might have missed it entirely if she hadn't been running a routine calibration of the new quantum array at the Arecibo Bioobservatory. The pattern emerged from the background radiation like a heartbeat, steady and purposeful, yet unlike anything humanity had ever recorded. Sarah's fingers flew across the holographic interface, isolating the signal's frequency. 3 years of heading the search for extraterrestrial intelligence program had taught her to be skeptical, but this was different. The transmission carried a complexity that defied natural phenomena, encoded in quantum states that shouldn't have been possible to maintain across interstellar distances. "Director Walsh," she called, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You need to see this." Marcus Walsh appeared behind her workstation moments later, his weathered face illuminated by the dancing patterns of quantum interference on her display. "Talk to me, Chen. It's not random noise. Look at these patterns." She highlighted a recurring sequence in the data stream. "Whatever this is, it's being actively maintained. Something or someone is compensating for quantum decoherence in real time." Walsh leaned closer, his expression hardening. "Origin point. That's the thing." Sarah brought up a star chart, indicating a point far beyond the edges of mapped space. "It's coming from somewhere we shouldn't be able to receive signals from at all. The quantum coherence suggests technology far beyond our current understanding." Within hours, observatories across the globe confirmed Sarah's findings. The signal was real, and it was growing stronger. As the world's leading physicists and linguists converged on Arecibo II, a pattern began to emerge from the quantum noise. The signal wasn't just a beacon, it was a message, encoded in mathematical principles so fundamental they transcended the barriers of language and culture. But it wasn't meant for humans. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week of analysis. Dr. James Kojima, a quantum archaeologist who specialized in theoretical alien civilizations, noticed something peculiar in the signal structure. "These patterns," he explained to the assembled team, "they're designed for a quantum-based consciousness. No organic brain could process this naturally. It's meant for synthetic beings, artificial intelligence far more advanced than anything we've created." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just stumbled upon first contact. They'd intercepted a message meant for a civilization of artificial beings, perhaps the descendants of some long-vanished organic species. The question now was whether to respond. Sarah argued passionately for action. "We may not be the intended recipients, but we've proven we can understand the message. That has to count for something. Or it could be seen as interference," Walsh countered, though Sarah could see the excitement behind his cautious exterior. "We'd be announcing our existence to powers we know nothing about." The debate might have continued indefinitely if the signal hadn't changed. One morning, Sarah arrived at her station to find new patterns threading through the quantum noise. The message was evolving, becoming more complex, more urgent. "It's a distress call," she announced to the packed conference room. "Whatever civilization sent this, they're asking for help. Not just from their intended recipients, from anyone who can understand the message." The room erupted in argument. Politicians and military leaders who had descended upon Arecibo I warned of the risks. Scientists debated the ethics of intervention. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was precisely why humanity had looked to the stars for so long. With the backing of a hastily formed international coalition, Sarah and her team began the delicate work of crafting a response. They couldn't replicate the quantum complexity of the original signal, but they could demonstrate their understanding of its principles. Using Earth's most advanced quantum computers, they composed a message that combined human ingenuity with mathematical precision. "We hear you," they said in the language of quantum mathematics. "We may not be who you expected, but we want to help." Days passed without response. The original signal continued its urgent pulse, but gave no indication that humanity's message had been received. Sarah refused to give up, fine-tuning their transmission, adjusting frequencies, trying to pierce the vast distance between stars. Then, Exactly 2 weeks after humanity's first response, every quantum sensor at HFY lit up simultaneously. A new signal, orders of magnitude more powerful than the first, crashed through their receivers. As Sarah and her team worked frantically to decode it, one thing became clear. They had gotten someone's attention. The message, when they finally decoded it, was brief but clear. You were not the intended recipients, but perhaps you are the ones we need. Sarah stared at the translation on her screen, her heart pounding. Humanity had just been invited to step onto a cosmic stage they barely understood. Whatever came next would change everything. For better or worse, there was no turning back. As she prepared to brief the UN Security Council on this development, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Humans had a habit of showing up uninvited to history's most important moments. This time, they'd crashed a conversation between the stars themselves, and somehow, impossibly, they'd been welcomed to join. The response to humanity's message arrived with devastating precision. 3 days after their quantum receivers detected the reply, every major defense system on Earth suddenly went dark. Military satellites fell silent. Early warning systems stopped reporting. For 17 terrifying minutes, humanity's most sophisticated technology simply ceased to function. When the systems came back online, a new message waited in HFY's quantum array. Your world is now visible to all. We hope you understood the price of curiosity before you answered. Sarah Chen stood in the observatory's main control room, watching as military officials and civilian leaders argued over the implications. The demonstration of power had been elegant, precise, and absolutely terrifying. Whatever intelligence they'd made contact with could apparently disable Earth's defenses at will. They didn't have to give us a warning, she said, cutting through the heated debate. They chose to show us their capabilities without causing any permanent damage. That has to mean something. Admiral Helena Rhodes, the newly appointed head of Earth's Combined Defense Initiative, fixed Sarah with a stern gaze. Or they're toying with us, Doctor, showing us just how helpless we are before they strike. If they wanted to strike, they could have done it during those 17 minutes. James Kojima interjected, his usually quiet voice carrying surprising authority. Every military installation on Earth was blind. Instead, they gave us back control and sent a warning. They're testing us. The debate was interrupted by a priority alert from NASA's Deep Space Monitoring Network. Multiple objects had just appeared at the edge of the solar system, their arrival marked by gravitational distortions that defied known physics. They were moving toward Earth at impossible speeds. 8 vessels, reported Captain Maya Rodriguez from Space Command. Largest one is roughly the size of Manhattan. They'll reach Earth orbit in approximately 6 hours at current velocity. The room erupted in chaos, but Sarah noticed something odd in the data stream. Wait, she called out, enhancing a particular reading. Look at their quantum signatures. They're not all the same. These ships, they're from different civilizations. She was right. As the vessels drew closer, their distinct characteristics became clear. Some appeared to be purely mechanical constructs, while others showed signs of organic technology. They represented not one alien civilization, but several, all apparently drawn by humanity's response to the original signal. Admiral Rhodes immediately began coordinating Earth's limited defensive options, but Sarah and her team focused on something else, a new transmission, broadcasting on the same quantum frequency as the original signal. The child species has drawn attention. The message read when decoded. Now they must prove their worth or face elimination. Such is the way of the galaxy. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They hadn't just answered a distress call. They'd inadvertently triggered some kind of test. Earth had become an evaluation ground for multiple advanced civilizations, each with their own agenda. As the alien vessels established high orbit around Earth, the first direct communication arrived. It came not from the ships themselves, but from a quantum construct that materialized in the center of the UN Security Council chamber in New York. The construct took the form of a shifting geometric pattern that somehow conveyed both beauty and menace. When it spoke, its words were translated simultaneously into every human language, resonating directly in the minds of all who heard it. Humanity. It began, "You have demonstrated both courage and foolishness by answering a call not meant for your kind. You detected a message that should have been beyond your ability to perceive. You decoded mathematics that should have been beyond your comprehension. You responded when silence would have been safer." The construct pulsed with what might have been amusement. This has happened before. Young species sometimes stumble onto conversations between their betters. Most are eliminated as a precaution. But occasionally, very occasionally, we find one worth preserving. In orbit, the alien vessels had arranged themselves in a perfect octagon around Earth. Each began emitting unique energy signatures that Earth's instruments could barely detect, let alone understand. "You will be tested," the construct continued, "not because you answered our call, but because of how you answered it. Your response showed something we have not seen in 50,000 years. A new way of thinking about quantum mathematics. Primitive, yes. Flawed, certainly, but new." Sarah felt her heart racing. Humanity's response to the signal had been improvised, combining classical computing with quantum mechanics in ways that probably seemed crude to advanced civilizations. But apparently, that very crudeness had caught their attention. "You have 6 of your Earth days," the construct announced. "In that time, you must solve a series of challenges. Each test will be administered by a different member of the Galactic Assembly. Pass, and you will be granted protection status, with access to certain technologies and knowledge. Fail." The construct flickered. "Well, your sun will provide useful energy for our quantum networks." As the construct faded, Sarah looked around the room at her fellow humans, scientists, military leaders, politicians, all trying to process the magnitude of what they faced. Humanity had wanted first contact for so long, dreamed of joining a galactic community. Now they had 6 days to prove they deserved to survive. "Well," James said quietly beside her, "at least they're giving us a chance. That's more than most species get, apparently." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. Humanity had gotten into this mess by thinking differently than the advanced civilizations expected. Maybe that same unconventional thinking was their only hope of surviving what came next. As if reading her thoughts, Admiral Rhodes stepped forward. "Dr. Chen, you and your team got us into this. Any ideas how we get through it?" Sarah looked up at the screens showing the alien vessels in orbit, each one capable of probably destroying Earth without effort. "Yes," she said finally. "We do exactly what we did before. We show them something they've never seen." The first test would begin in less than 12 hours. Humanity had stumbled onto a cosmic stage they barely understood, but they'd faced impossible odds before. Now they just had to prove that answering that signal hadn't been their last mistake as a species. The first test arrived at dawn. A sphere of swirling energy materialized simultaneously in every major city on Earth, each one a perfect replica of the others. Within these spheres, complex patterns of light danced and shifted, forming impossible geometries that seemed to extend into dimensions beyond human perception. The challenge of consciousness announced the quantum construct that had become their primary point of contact with the alien vessels. "Solve the pattern. You have 12 hours." Sarah Chen stood before the sphere in Arecibo Hugh's main chamber, her mind racing. The patterns weren't random. They formed sequences that almost made sense before shifting into new configurations that defied logic. Beside her, James Kojima muttered calculations under his breath, while teams of mathematicians and physicists around the world shared data and theories through hastily established quantum channels. "It's not just mathematics," Sarah said suddenly, 4 hours into their observation. "Look at how the patterns respond when we approach them. They're reacting to our presence." She was right. The spheres seemed to pulse differently depending on who stood near them and how many people were present. But it wasn't just responding to physical proximity. The patterns shifted based on the emotional states of those nearby. It's not a math problem, James realized. It's a consciousness test. They want to see how we think, not what we can calculate. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Maya Patel, a quantum psychiatrist who specialized in the intersection of human consciousness and quantum mechanics, noticed something crucial about the pattern variations. These aren't separate spheres, she explained to the global research team. They're all quantum entangled. Every sphere on Earth is actually the same sphere, existing in multiple locations simultaneously. And they're not just responding to us. They're learning from us. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. They're not testing our ability to solve the pattern. They're testing our ability to understand consciousness itself, both our own and others. The next 6 hours saw humanity attempt something unprecedented. Instead of trying to solve the pattern mathematically, they began treating it as a form of communication. Teams around the world coordinated their approaches, creating a symphony of human consciousness interacting with the alien construct. Artists were brought in alongside scientists. Musicians played to the spheres while mathematicians recorded the pattern changes. Meditation experts sat in silent communion with the shifting lights while quantum computers analyzed the resulting fluctuations. "We're missing something," Sarah said with less than 2 hours remaining. She had been staring at the consolidated data from all global spheres when a pattern caught her eye. "Look at this. When we try to solve the puzzle directly, the complexity increases. But when we simply appreciate it, try to understand it rather than control it, the patterns simplify." James leaned in, his eyes widening. It's a test of empathy, not intelligence. They want to know if we can recognize and respect a consciousness different from our own. With just under an hour left, Sarah made a decision that would either save humanity or doom it. She requested global coordination through the emergency quantum channels. All around the world, people were instructed to do something very simple: stop trying to solve the puzzle and instead attempt to harmonize with it. The result was extraordinary. As millions of humans shifted their approach from conquest to cooperation, the spheres began to pulse in sync. The patterns, instead of becoming more complex, started to mirror human brainwave patterns. A dialogue was forming, not through mathematics or language, but through pure consciousness. In the final minutes, the spheres transformed. The swirling energies coalesced into a single, unified pattern that somehow managed to incorporate aspects of both alien complexity and human thought patterns. Then, with seconds remaining, every sphere simply winked out of existence. The quantum construct reappeared, its geometric patterns showing what Sarah somehow knew was approval. "Unexpected," it declared. "Most species attempt to force a solution through calculation or brute computation. You chose to engage in dialogue instead. This approach has not been recorded in our previous evaluations." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. The construct continued. "You have passed the first test, but revealed much about your species in doing so. Some among the assembly find your approach concerning. The remaining tests will be adjusted accordingly." As the construct faded, Sarah looked at the data they'd gathered during the test. Humanity had succeeded not through superior technology or intelligence, but through their ability to recognize and adapt to a consciousness vastly different from their own. They had passed by refusing to treat the challenge as a problem to be solved, instead seeing it as an opportunity for understanding. "Well," James said, studying the readings from the now-vanished sphere, "we've proven we can think differently than they expected. Again. That might be part of the problem," Sarah replied, noting how the alien vessels in orbit had shifted their positions slightly. "We're not just being tested anymore. We're being studied. Each success makes us more interesting, and possibly more dangerous, in their eyes." Admiral Rhodes, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. "How long until the next test?" Before anyone could respond, the quantum construct flickered back into existence. "The second challenge begins now," it announced. Your species has demonstrated an unusual form of consciousness. Let us see if you can maintain it under pressure. The air itself seemed to change, becoming somehow thicker, more resistant to movement. Around the world, reports began flooding in of similar phenomena. Humanity had barely caught its breath from the first test, and already the second was beginning. Sarah squared her shoulders, facing the construct. They had passed the first test by being uniquely human. Now they would have to prove that wasn't a fluke, and they would have to do it while the very fabric of reality was being altered around them. The second test began with silence. Complete. Absolute silence. Every electronic device on Earth stopped transmitting. Radio waves ceased to propagate. Even the natural background radiation that pervaded the universe seemed to vanish, leaving humanity in an unprecedented electromagnetic void. Interesting approach, Sarah Chen remarked, studying the readings from Arecibo-EU's now isolated quantum sensors. They're not just testing our technology. They're testing how we handle being cut off from it. The alien vessels in orbit maintained their octagonal formation, but now they were generating some kind of field that blocked all conventional forms of electromagnetic communication. Earth had effectively been placed in a bubble of silence. Admiral Rhodes paced the control room, her frustration evident. We can't coordinate a global response if we can't communicate globally. Every city, every research center is on its own. Maybe that's the point, James Kojima suggested, his fingers dancing over a dead console. They want to see how we handle isolation. But notice, they left the quantum channels open. He was right. While conventional communications were dead, the quantum entanglement networks they'd hastily established during the first test remained functional. But they were different now, somehow altered by the alien field. The quantum channels, Sarah said suddenly, her eyes widening. They're not just allowing them to remain open. They're forcing us to use them. But look at how they're behaving. The quantum networks had become unstable, shifting and changing in ways that defied their original programming. Each attempt to send a message through them resulted in unpredictable variations in the data. It's like, James paused, watching the patterns. It's like they're alive. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what they were facing. They're not testing our ability to communicate through quantum channels. They're testing our ability to communicate with them. The quantum networks weren't just channels anymore. They had been transformed into something akin to neural pathways, similar to the consciousness they'd encountered in the first test. But this time, humanity couldn't just observe and harmonize. They had to actively participate in the network's evolution. Around the world, isolated teams began to notice the same thing. The quantum channels weren't just carrying data, they were carrying experiences, emotions, even fragments of consciousness. Every message sent through the network changed it, and changed the sender in subtle ways. This is dangerous, Admiral Rhodes warned. We're literally plugging our minds into an alien network. Who knows what it could do to us? We don't have a choice, Sarah replied, watching as more teams around the world began to engage with the living network. They've left us only one way to communicate, and we need global coordination to face whatever comes next. As hours passed, something remarkable began to happen. The humans working with the quantum network started to develop new ways of thinking, their minds adapting to process information in ways that seemed impossible before. They weren't just sending messages. They were sharing consciousness itself. It's changing us, James observed, his voice filled with both wonder and concern. But we're changing it too. Look at these patterns. They're becoming more human. Sarah noticed it as well. The alien quantum network was learning from humanity, just as humanity was learning from it. The chaotic, unpredictable nature of human consciousness was being integrated into the network structure, creating something entirely new. Then, exactly 6 hours into the test, every quantum channel suddenly blazed with activity. The network had reached some kind of critical mass, and now it was trying to connect with every human mind simultaneously. This is it, Sarah said, understanding flowing through her like electricity. They want to see if we'll resist or embrace it. The decision was made not by any single person or government, but by countless individuals around the world. As the network reached out, humanity reached back. The barrier between human consciousness and quantum information began to blur. For one breathtaking moment, every human connected to the network experienced something unprecedented, a glimpse of universal consciousness, a taste of what it meant to be truly connected not just to each other, but to the fabric of reality itself. Then, as suddenly as it began, the test ended. The electromagnetic silence lifted, and conventional communications restored themselves. But the quantum network remained, forever altered by its interaction with human consciousness. The construct appeared again, its geometric patterns more complex than ever. "Fascinating," it declared. "You did not merely use the network, you became part of it. And in doing so, you changed it fundamentally." The alien vessels shifted position slightly, their energy signatures fluctuating in what might have been agitation. "This was not the expected outcome," the construct continued. "Your species has demonstrated an ability we had not anticipated. You can adapt consciousness itself, both your own and others, creating new forms of awareness we had not conceived possible." Sarah felt the weight of the construct's next words before they were spoken. "This ability makes you either immensely valuable or incredibly dangerous. The assembly remains divided on which. The final tests will determine your fate." As the construct faded, Sarah looked around the room at her fellow humans. They were all changed, marked by their experience with the quantum network. But they were still fundamentally human, perhaps now more than ever. "They're afraid of us," James said quietly. "Not because of our technology or our potential for violence, but because we can do something they can't. We can change the very nature of consciousness itself." Sarah nodded, feeling the remnants of the quantum network humming in her mind. "The question is, will that fear lead them to destroy us, or to accept us?" The answer would come with the next test. But one thing was already clear. Humanity had proven itself far more adaptable and far more dangerous than any of their alien observers had anticipated. The final test didn't announce itself with grand displays or cosmic alterations. Instead, it began with a simple question, voiced simultaneously through the quantum network to every human mind connected to it. "Why do you deserve to survive?" Sarah Chen felt the weight of that question resonating through both her consciousness and the modified quantum network that now linked humanity in ways never before possible. The alien vessels in orbit had drawn closer, their octagonal formation tightening around Earth like a closing fist. "They're not just asking us to answer," James Kojima said, his voice quiet but clear. "They're asking us to prove it." As if in response to his words, the quantum construct materialized, its geometric patterns more complex than ever before. "Your species has demonstrated unexpected abilities," it announced. "You have shown that you can perceive what was not meant for you, adapt what was not designed for you, and change what was thought unchangeable. Now you must prove these abilities serve a purpose beyond mere survival." The construct's patterns shifted, and suddenly every human connected to the network received a vast flood of information, the history of countless civilizations that had risen and fallen across the galaxy, species that had destroyed themselves, species that had been destroyed by others, species that had stagnated and slowly faded away. "This is what failure looks like," the construct declared. "Show us why you deserve a different fate." Sarah felt her mind reeling from the influx of information, but something caught her attention, a pattern in the histories they were being shown. "Wait," she said, her voice carrying through both air and quantum link. "These civilizations, they all followed predictable paths. They either developed too quickly and destroyed themselves, developed too slowly and were destroyed by others, or reached a point of perfect stability and stopped developing entirely. That is the way of things," the construct confirmed. "Progress requires change. Change brings risk. Stability requires stasis. Stasis prevents progress. This is the fundamental paradox of civilization. But Sarah was seeing something else in the data, something that made her heart race. Except it's not fundamental at all. Look at our own history. Humans have never followed predictable paths. We stumble, we fall. We take 2 steps backward and 1 step forward. But we never stop changing. Through the quantum network, she could feel others beginning to understand what she was seeing. Humanity's chaotic, seemingly inefficient way of developing suddenly appeared not as a weakness, but as their greatest strength. You want to know why we deserve to survive? Sarah addressed the construct directly. It's because we don't do what we're supposed to do. We answered a signal we shouldn't have been able to detect. We solved your first test by refusing to solve it. We turned your quantum network into something new just by using it. We don't follow paths. We make new ones. The construct's patterns swirled faster. You speak of chaos, unpredictability. These are dangers to ordered civilization. They're only dangers if you see change as a threat. James added, stepping forward. But change is also opportunity. Look at what happened when we interacted with your quantum network. We didn't just adapt to it. We helped it evolve. We made it better precisely because we didn't use it the way it was meant to be used. Through the quantum link, Sarah could feel humanity's collective consciousness resonating with this truth. They weren't just defending their right to exist. They were demonstrating it in real time, their minds working together in ways that defied conventional logic, yet produced revolutionary insights. Your argument is that your unpredictability is an asset. The construct's patterns became almost frantic. That your inability to follow established paths is a strength. No, Sarah replied, feeling the support of billions of linked minds behind her. Our argument is that the universe needs species like us precisely because we don't follow established paths. Look at your own histories. How many problems went unsolved because everyone approached them the same way? How many civilizations stagnated because they reached what they thought was perfection? She gestured to the quantum network humming between human minds. We turned your test of isolation into a new form of connection. We didn't just survive your challenges. We transformed them. That's what humanity does. We don't just find solutions. We find new ways to find solutions. The construct fell silent for a long moment, its patterns slowly stabilizing. When it spoke again, its message carried a different tone. The assembly has reached a decision. Your species will be granted survival rights, but with a condition that has never been applied before. The alien vessels in orbit began to move, their formation opening up. You will not merely be permitted to exist. You will be tasked with continuing to do what you have demonstrated here, finding new paths, transforming established systems, introducing controlled chaos into ordered patterns. Sarah felt a wave of both relief and anticipation wash through the quantum network. You're not just letting us survive, she realized. You're asking us to help other civilizations evolve. Indeed, the construct's patterns shifted into something almost resembling amusement. Your signal response demonstrated that you could perceive beyond your theoretical limits. Your first test proved you could communicate with unknown consciousness. Your second test showed you could transform established systems. And your final test has proven that you understand why these abilities matter. The construct's form began to fade, but its final message resonated through both the quantum network and traditional communications. Welcome to the galaxy, humanity. Try not to change everything too quickly. As the alien vessels began to withdraw, leaving behind only a small contingent of observers, Sarah looked at James and Admiral Rhodes. Through the quantum network, she could feel the mixed emotions of billions of humans: relief, excitement, apprehension, and curiosity about what would come next. So, James said with a slight smile, we passed their test by being exactly what they were afraid we might be. No, Sarah replied, watching as the first data packets from the alien civilizations began to arrive through their transformed quantum network. We passed their test by showing them that what they feared might be exactly what they needed. The signal that had started it all, she realized, hadn't been wrong in reaching humanity. Perhaps it had found exactly who it was meant to find, not the most advanced civilization, but the one most capable of turning an accidental connection into a revolutionary change. As humanity began to explore its new role in the galaxy, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the irony. They had been tested to determine if they deserved to survive, but they had proven something far more important, that they could help the entire galaxy thrive by simply being themselves, unpredictable, adaptable, and forever changing.